every single book in the store is displayed face out, so there's no spines anywhere. And that's really we're really vouching for every book that we carry. Like we don't just see it in the catalog and go, oh, that looks cool, or oh, we think we can sell that. Like somebody who works at the store has to actually vouch for every item as of like, no, I can personally hand sell this. I know who I recommend this to. I know who's going to lose their mind about this. Um,
Hi, my name is Adam Freeman. This is Comic Industry Insiders, a weekly podcast where we bring you the people behind the scenes of the comic book industry and try and get to know them as people. Try to understand how they got to the path of this weird job that we all seem to make a living at. And learn more about the tips and tricks that they've learned along the way that can help your business or career in comics. This week, our guest is Avi Ehrlich. Before I jump into this, I want to say that I think that the interesting thing here is along with politics and culture of every variety, media has changed and fractured over these last few years, especially. They become individual in a way that we're all seeking new voices and voices that sound like our own, no matter how far off the norm we are. While this can be scary to those that are building large-scale production companies for any medium, including comics, most people, like this week's guest, it's exactly the way things should be. Avi is an anti-capitalist entrepreneur. The comic shop that Avi and his colorful team built sounds more like a gallery than your LCS. The comics publisher they started in their bedroom has grown into an undeniable force in our industry, presenting highly specific and individual voices with the very highest print quality. They are producing the personal and outlandish and grotesque stories that my 23-year-old self would have obsessed over, with the print quality that the 51-year-old me is just completely floored by. I'm continually impressed with Avi, the way they treat business, the showmanship they bring to marketing, and the honesty and what must be exhausting rage they seem to be fueled by. I'm thrilled to introduce this week's guest, Avi Ehrlich. Hey! How you doing?
Hello. Thank you for the kind words.
Writing the intro might have become my favorite part. It's just an opportunity to say, why is this person I think is interesting the most interesting person for you this week? And you are definitely that. I have looked forward to this for a very long time, probably since the first time you and your crew came bounding into a retailer meeting wearing fuchsia jumpsuits, matching all of you, and just essentially taking the stage with so a little background. When I live in New York, all of our kind of social group is centered around sort of New York nightlife. A lot of burlesque folk, a lot of freak show people, a lot of that stuff. And so when I see you, I see immediately who you are, because this is the people that I hang out with here. But it's strange to see you inside of the people I hang out with in comics. So I could see that showmanship immediately, and it just immediately jumped out to me. This is somebody who I want to get to know. So thank you for
amazing.
doing this.
Where do you?
So you're in. Sorry, go ahead.
I said my pleasure. No, we definitely come from those worlds and have like carny backgrounds. But one thing about your introduction I want to argue with is I definitely do feel that like rage about what the comic industry is right now, but more it's matched evenly though with like a light crystal, dark crystal of hope and optimism and joy of what it could be. So I'm not doing this out of like anger and spite. It's more like, dude, we could do this right. Let's just show how you could do it better. Like, I mean, we're not God's gift to the world. Like, people will improve upon our methods, but it's like there's so much low hanging fruit to just do it so much better. It's like, let's just try our best. But yeah, sorry, please.
Can you give me an example? No, please. Well, believe me, I have a long list of questions, but I definitely, part of the reason I pick long format is I like just following the conversation where it goes. What is the number one example that jumps out to you, like that you think that most publishing doesn't quite get, or retail, honestly, because you are a retailer and a publisher, right? What is the low hanging fruit?
Yeah, I mean, I could ramble endlessly in all directions and not give you any time to speak about this topic. So I definitely want to like, let you get to your questions and everything. I mean, I think everything from treating artists with integrity, like transparent accounting, um, like marketing that's interesting, that doesn't just try to sell to existing fans, like having a broader idea of who a comic fan even is, um, like realizing that comic fans are like on in this time in the year of our Lord 2024, we have more people who read comics on Instagram and Webtoon than like Marvel. Like to call like Spider-Man a mainstream comic is like such horse shit because I don't know, I'm social. I go to parties and I talk to people who have enjoyed reading an independent comic recently that they're really excited about. And like nobody ever brings up like what Spider-Man or the X-Men are up to. So, and like the marketing thing, I'm really curious what event that was. But like even that, like we were at Comics Pro, that might have been it, and like
It's
that
been
room
two
was
or
so
three. They're all kind of mushed together in my head. You definitely have a branding of the way you present yourselves, which is so rare, you know. And
like
when it does show up, it usually shows up in the most boring way, like a, you know, logo on a polo or something. But yeah, yeah.
yeah, like we're supposed to be having fun and comics are a joy to read and engage with. Like why would we just go up there and read a catalog? Like it if you're not showing people the fun you're having, like how like why should they trust you on that? Um So,
I
uh,
absolutely
and,
agree. I absolutely agree. I think you need to
and even
give
like
people the
running,
energy that you want them to give in. Yeah.
and like I also like, I mean, I think there was a time when people were bored out of their fucking minds, like, and they had to select from a very narrow set of available media. But like now that there's infinite choice, like I don't understand the periodical format seems designed to be like disposable temporary garbage. And I don't understand this idea of why you would put the resources into producing a book that's not meant to be evergreen, where like a self-cover floppy is very fun. I mean, I grew up reading comics. Like I love comics, but like I'm
Right.
41 years old and I still love comics, but I don't like buying one that will immediately fall apart after I like read it in a few different places or lend it to a friend. And it's like it costs so little to produce a book with good quality. Like the difference between printing a shitty quality book and a really high quality book is so tiny that like why would you after you put all that work into writing a story and illustrating it and like the whole team effort that goes into making a comic come into existence and then just like at the very end decide to print it in the worst quality possible way like and like it just is such a disservice to the art, the medium, the fans, and like it's just so strange to me. So I don't know, I just feel like you could there's so much more respect that we should be having for the medium, for the artist, for the consumers. um like
Let me ask you though, I mean, about that. Then, just to push back on that a little bit.
sure.
What is the difference in your mind then between, let's say, a 32 page floppy comic that is on the local comic shop shelves and a zine that's sold at a zine fest? Like, it's still, I mean, both are low quality, both are saddle stitched, both are showing, you know, as you said, they're essentially creating something designed to be ephemeral. I mean, one of them has somebody, you know, looking at, you know, spine ticks with a microscope, and the other doesn't usually. I'm sure there's somebody out there who's collecting zines that way, but um, don't you? Isn't there a
Yeah,
dissonance there between those two cultural items?
I'm gonna say not at all because I mean we make zines all the time. We host zine making nights at our store, and people who make zines like make a decision of like, okay, what kind of paper do I want to use for my cover stock? And they'll never use paper that's as shitty as your normal like 28 page comic that's on the shelves. Um, they're also typically at a size that is more convenient for reading and enjoying. Like the comic book size that we take as sacred was determined by the cheapest possible way to print on the like broadsheet pages that were available at that point in history. Nobody ever said like this is the best page size to read a comic book at. like we're all, we grew up with it, we're trained with it, so it's nostalgic. But like if you were trying to create like your best balanced page, that's not the dimensions that most people would have decided on. So I would say that a zine typically has much better quality. It is a lot more thoughtfully designed by one person who like had a vision for it. They're not like cramming their work into an arbitrary standard that doesn't best serve what they're doing. Um, like, and yeah, it is designed to be ephemeral, but like, I don't know, I've got like bins and bins of zines that I collected over the years, and I regularly go through them and try to purge them and give away, or like ones I don't want anymore, but I continue to accumulate them. And they are in such better condition than my long boxes of traditional American comics, which like the paper, the size, like they're designed to get damaged. And if you have to keep them in a poly bag with a board, it's like you can't even really casually enjoy them. Like if you're selling to
Yeah.
collectors rather than readers, like what are you doing? Like we're not like, I don't know, it's just weird.
No, I mean, listen, I will say that I've put out, I have, in the companies that I've worked with and for, we put out stuff that is self-covered shitty product, but we've also like, I think at Bad Idea, I think that, very many times I've held Silver Sprocket books in one hand and Bad Idea books in the other. And like, this could have been produced by the same person, right? This could have
Well,
been the same production team, you
so
know?
Pee Pee Poo Poo, staple bound, Eisner
Yes.
nominated, but the cover's got like a cool hologram thing going on. There's a
Sure.
sticker sheet
Yeah.
in back. Like, so this is fun. Like, this is a cool, fun
Yeah, it
magazine
is.
that
I
you can
love
read.
your shit.
But like the
Yeah.
paper has a thicker cardstock to it. It like there's value to this, and um, I think this will hold up better than I, yeah. I don't know. I think I'm making my point, but like
Yeah.
zine size, like Magical Beatdown is tiny. It's on stiffer cardstock. It is much easier to keep a smaller thing safe and not getting damaged. But also, like, don't get mad if it get like my favorite comics are worn to hell because I keep lending them to friends, and I feel like they have value in being read and enjoyed and engaged with. They don't have value locked away in a vault or like on a shelf where you can't read it. Like the whole point is to enjoy it.
I have, well, I honestly, but there's an argumentative part of me that wants to argue with you, but philosophically, I can't agree in
I mean,
more.
I don't know.
So
Welcome
it's,
to my TED Talk. Comics can be different things for different people. Like, if your joy is
exactly. And
having
that's,
the
I think
Kills
that's
catalog in a vault, like, more power to you. I just can't relate. But I'm glad you're happy.
right. And that's just it. I think that's really what I think, especially when I was thinking about that intro, was one of the things that you've done really well is to create highly specialized product for a highly specialized audience. You're not looking to make comics for everyone,
I think
seemingly,
kind of the opposite,
you
because I
know?
think the traditional American comic is for a highly specialized audience who, like, wants to have a collection of long
No
boxes in
doubt.
a very particular way of collecting, whereas our comics, like, we do sell a lot of comics to comic book stores. That's still like our primary, like, comic shops carry comics, but we sell so many comics to places that are not comic book stores, like coffee shops and plant stores and tattoo shops and like more, for lack of a better term, like lifestyle companies or accounts. And we're like the only comic publisher they carry, but our comics are relevant to their audiences because they are for everybody. Like, I think Pee Pee Poo Poo or Magical Beatdown will appeal to a much larger audience than like the very specific comic book sized thing that you really have to already be like a cult, in the cult of the converted, to want that. So I kind of think we've got
I
like a
buy
much
that. I buy that.
better, like they really are
I,
for, I mean, nothing's for everybody, but they're for a lot more people.
all right. You're right. I find nothing to argue with there. What talk about the distribution though to that, because I've been involved in campaigns that are trying to move outside of comics. So much of what people talk about when they say we really should be finding new audiences. It's so difficult to do. It's such an expensive thing to tend to do, whether it be in actual money and advertising and marketing, or just time and attention. Like you're
Mhm.
banging your head against a wall anytime you go into a new marketplace. So talk about how that distribution was built for you. Like how did you build it, and what is it what does that ongoing maintenance feel like?
Yeah, it definitely is a lot more front-loaded work to get into a new market, but the rewards are plentiful. So when we were starting out with comics, we did not have Diamond distribution. Lunar didn't exist yet. Diamond like turned us away like 3 or 4 times over like a 4 or 5 year period. Uh, but we were scrappy and relentless in DIY. Like, we sold comics on our website. We sold I went around to all of the local stores that I could reach on my bicycle or my friend's car. And over that time we learned what worked and what didn't. Like we really had conversations with the shop owners. And then once we had things that were like proven successes for them, like we were able to refine both our product and the way that we marketed it and presented it and marketing materials and everything. Then we were able to use that experience to kind of show like testimonials, like, hey, here's some photos of our books doing well in these shops. Here's what the shop owners have to say about it. Here's our unique approach of what we found worked. And then you can kind of use that as a sales tool to present it out to a wider world. So, for example, we've set up stands with our books and like corner liquor stores, like corner stores, and they don't carry comics. They would never carry comics, but they know us because we buy a lot of alcohol, and we and they're like, yeah, like let's try this out, whatever. And once we figure out the model that works really well for them, we can demonstrate that and then go online or talk to the artists on our roster and find like the comparable accounts everywhere else. And we've got like a little pitch packet ready to show them of like, hey, you're not our guinea pig. We've already workshopped this and now we're ready to expand it out to more places. Um, but like, and the word of mouth really does the work for you. Like, if you're making quality work and you're easy to work with and people are making money and having fun, like they want to tell their friends about it and they want to support you. Um, but it helps that like, we're not exclusive with any distributors, so any anyone who wants to sell our work is able to do so very easily, whether they're a comic book store, a traditional bookstore, or just like a person who sets up a box of merchandise in the back of a concert or at like a swap meet or whatever. Like you can we do our own direct wholesale. We've got all the different distributors, but we also have like weird niche distribution. Like AK Press is like a political publisher and distributor of like, radical um like leftist, for lack of a better term, literature. And like they've got our stuff in stock, so it's accessible to whoever wants to get it.
Am I understanding that the goat logo that you have says a cab, which actually means all cats are beautiful? Is that right? Am I getting that right?
All comics are books.
Okay, that works too.
Yeah, all cats are
uh,
beautiful.
yes. Well, this one's also annoying. Um, so let's before I want to step back and go through your history a little bit. But before we do that, give us an overview of what your businesses look like right now. As we're standing right now, you've got Silver Sprocket, the publishing company. Are you still also producing and/or producing records, distributing
Um,
records? Is that still a part of your
I've
business?
not made any records for at least 6 or 7 years now, which I'm really
Okay,
excited about. But I definitely like cherish all of those experiences, and
I'm
it
sure.
definitely laid the groundwork for our approach. And I got to like learn a lot of the really difficult lessons about working with creative folks and distribution and manufacturing and everything in a parallel industry, so that when we did
Mm-hmm.
really shift focus to comics, we were able to kind of hit the ground with that foundation, both of experience but also professional relationships. Um, but like
Sure,
at the beginning, our only distribution was record stores because we had those existing relationships from the record label. And
that makes a lot of
I'm
sense.
trying really
So
hard to, because
today,
like,
how many? Okay.
good.
Please.
Oh, I was just
Well,
saying
I
though
was
that
going to
like
say.
we we still handle the like distribution for some records, and especially digitally now because that's like a much bigger game. But
Right.
because I'm not actively involved in the record industry anymore, I don't feel ethical about taking a cut for work I'm not doing. So I'm very actively trying to get
Gotcha.
all these bands to like just have your own record label. Here's I wrote up what you need to do to just make all the money and do it yourself. And the bands who have their shit together have taken me up on that, and I've helped them make that transition. The bands who like don't want to talk to each other and just want to get a royalty twice a year, like, okay, fine. Like I've lowered my cut. It's not much work for me, but like I've moved on to, I'm not
Right.
focused on that world at the moment.
Okay, so how big is Silver Sprocket Comics then? How many? I mean, what's the title size? You
We're
think?
bigger than the Beatles. Or I'm sorry,
Big.
what's the question?
How many? What's your backlist look like? Title wise, do you
We've got a
have?
little over 100 books out at this point,
Okay, great.
and they're all
And your
evergreen.
retail, you have a retail store.
Yeah, we've got a
Sorry.
retail store in San Francisco. It's a indie comic focused space. So we don't have any corporate owned IP in the entire building, like no Marvel or DC. Everything is the creative work of an individual who it's like their own dream and project. Um, Very few projects even that are like made by a team, though we do have quite a few of those, but even those are they're like owned by the people who made them, regardless of being self-published or through a major publisher like, Abrams or First Second or whatever. Um, and we also kind of distinguish ourselves by every single book in the store is displayed face out, so there's no spines anywhere. And that's really we're really vouching for every book that we carry. Like we don't just see it in the catalog and go, oh, that looks cool, or oh, we think we can sell that. Like somebody who works at the store has to actually vouch for every item as of like, no, I can personally hand sell this. I know who I recommend this to. I know who's going to lose their mind about this. So
That's a fascinating model, though. In this era of every store has to become a curator. Every store must become a curator of what products define your store, because the selections are so vast that the only thing you can do is curate the product and build community, right? And
absolutely.
you've really focused in on that. That is hyper curation. If everything is faced out, and you have a legitimate reason for everything to own the shelf, that's
Mhm.
yeah. Wow.
And we didn't
uh
like start as big as we are. Like we started as like a weird pop-up, and it very slowly expanded. Like that's not something that you can just do out the gate. Like you've got to
right.
like slow and steady is the only way to establish that. But like because we're a publisher too, we go to like indie comic fest all over the world, and like it's funny that like we ship a pallet out of all of our merchandise to sell of our own books, and then we ship back a pallet that's sometimes bigger than the pallet we shipped out because we buy so many comics from independent creators so that we could bring them back to our store. So we've got this amazing curation of like the coolest shit out there that doesn't have a barcode that you could never find on Amazon, but like
Yeah.
we know how cool it is just from being around those creators and being at all those events and seeing it.
It's remarkable that you're able to run it. I want to come back to the shop and how that works, but before we do, I'd like to go way back. So the earliest dates I could find for your story was Springman Records in '98. And just as a background, I've already told you a little bit about what our life is like here now, but my partner Gabby was a hardcore kid, and like as seemingly every other hardcore kid I knew have met, I was definitely not, but every one of them had some sort of story about creating their own zines or being involved in bands, or they created their own labels or whatever. They all had a piece of it. They all wanted ownership of it. None of them were just consumers. It's a
Yep.
wonderful, incredible culture. I'm so jealous I wasn't part of. And it feels like that's where you kind of came from. Am I right?
Yeah, we come to comics from zine world for sure, from the idea that you don't have to follow a corporate process or structure or get permission from anyone to do what you want to do, that you can personally create the world you want to be a part of, like throw the party you want to go to, create the media that you want to consume, and do it on your own terms that are right for you and your community, rather than whatever blueprints have been laid out by like the like dinosaur capitalists who are out there destroying everything.
Who cares about the gatekeepers because you don't care about that gate, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
And
well,
so
we'd be
tell me
doing a
about
disservice to our artists and our work if we weren't trying to get it everywhere. But like, we're not going to bend over backwards to like make Amazon like us. Like, we'd rather they didn't
right.
carry, that's it's just not worth our while, and it's not in line with our values. But yeah, the punk rock scene is very participatory. Like, there's no even just going to shows, you're a part of that in a meaningful way. You're helping organize things. You're like jumping in to do sound, or like put a mic stand back up. Like there's no like everyone's a participant. And I think that
Right.
that ethos is still strong with what we've going on. Like we couldn't get to where we are now without maintaining that.
So you would start Freeman Records in Cupertino. Is that where you're from?
Yeah, that's where I grew
Yeah.
up. My parents were worked in Silicon Valley in the '70s. It was very different than what it is now. Um, but
I
it's
imagine
hard for me
so.
to know exactly how different. But yeah, so I grew up in the South Bay in Cupertino and Sunnyvale before going to college in San Jose and Sacramento, and then coming back to San Francisco.
What year was this you were in college? And what years was
This
this
was
in San Jose?
so I tested out of high school when I was 14, and then I got my double A degree when I was 16, and then I was a college student full time until I was 22, when like all of a sudden the people around me were a little younger than me rather than older than me, and I didn't want to be around them anymore. So I was like, okay, it's time to go. So I got like 6 or 7 different majors, and was kind of a nerd, and that was interspersed with touring a lot with bands, like tour managing and just getting out of my hometown, like a cool way to travel and see the world and hang out with my friends.
Yeah. I again talking about Gabby, my partner, and her the experience. They would just travel the world, like
Hmm.
staying in people's houses and doing shows, and then yeah, it's remarkable. So this is like the early aughts. The only reason I bring this up is I would during this period. I'm in late '90s, early aughts. I was had a working in a comic shop and then owned a comic shop in Southern California, and would go up to San Jose in that area for like the Ape fests and those kinds of
Hmm.
things. If I don't know if you remember those,
Yeah, we were always
but
at
so I'm
those.
just okay, yeah, because like slave labor was, I don't know, slave labor and Fantagraphics, and those people were doing some work that feels a lot like the work that you're doing now, which is part of when I talk about how the work I loved in my 20s, it feels like a lot like what you're doing here. You know,
Yeah,
if
when I was
anything, you're
16 and
taking work
17.
like that and hyper producing it. You know,
Yeah, but
yeah,
like when I was 16 and 17, I was doing mail order for slave labor graphics. And I was very upfront with them of like, hey, I want this job because I want to learn how to do mail order right. So like I'm
yeah,
explicitly here for corporate espionage. Um, and it was interesting. Like, I remember like Dan Votto asked me, like, he's like, yeah, this band AFI wants us to make their dolls because they liked our like Lenore dolls and Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. And I told him like, you should
yeah.
definitely do this. They're incredibly popular and you'll make a ton of money. And he's like, oh, I don't see it. like, I'm like, okay.
He was, I mean, he had a crazy hit with Joan and Vasquez, and
Mhm.
I don't know where that work is anymore. We haven't seen that in so long.
I think it's
Yeah,
probably
uh,
still in print. I mean, I imagine they're still friends. Like, he comes like Dan still hosts like a version like a weird stepchild of Ape in San Jose, and gets Vasquez to like come out as a guest pretty regularly. But I don't think that has the
really.
same luster that it had at that moment.
Yeah, probably not. I could see that. That did have a moment there, and that moment seems to have passed.
I mean, I
But
like
Dan was
love.
doing incredible work. He was doing incredible work back then.
I
I
feel
loved
like
a lot of the stuff they were doing.
No, not the same. I mean, like Milk and Cheese and like
Mm-hmm.
Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, obviously, but they had such a amazing variety and quality of work that they put out, and I feel really
They were doing a
bummed that
bunch of
I feel
comics, like autobiographical stuff, like Slacker and those kinds of books. It was, I don't know, it was a
like
great time.
so many amazing names came out of SLG Publishing, and but I feel so bad that like Dan has always struck me as like really bummed out about comics. Like I think his Twitter
Hmm.
bio says like wasted my life on comics, and um
Oh,
I feel like he might have been like successful enough to be able to keep doing it, but not enough to feel like he was really
yeah.
succeeding. And I don't know. I feel like I really want him to have more joy and pride in like the work that he's done because it really is so triumphant. Um,
He
but
should.
I mean,
That
it
was
is
a
what
that
it
was a
is.
beautiful thing that he built. Yeah, they brought some incredible voices forward, and those ape shows, some of the biggest names in comics I met for the first time there.
Well, I
I
mean,
I
Ape is
met and
kind of a
bought like
salty
Brian Michael
bug.
Bendis pages there. Yeah. What?
Well, like, cause Dan threw the first ape in San Jose, and it was my good bud from journalism school, who's now like the head photo editor for like Bloomberg China, um, was dressed up in the ape suit with like a sign because like nobody knew what it was, and like more people came in for from him dancing with the sign than from knowing what it was. And then the San Diego Comic Con Corporation bought Ape because they wanted to have like a foothold in the Bay Area and indie comics.
Wow.
And the Ape shows in San Francisco were fantastic. You know, like it, any community needs a place to exist and meet and talk to each other. But at the same time, it was being run from San Diego, where they didn't really have a good understanding of the San Francisco Bay Area art scene or community. Um,
Right.
it was great that we had a show, but it was also a bummer that like it wasn't really curated with the Bay Area art community in mind. It was just what we had. And I guess it was never even really profitable for them. And they eventually just gave it back to Dan because they were like, we don't know how to make this work. But it
Yeah.
still was a tremendous service to the art community just to have a cool show that was um, at least in name about independent comics and art.
Yeah. That was one of my favorites. I'm glad to know that he's doing something with it, but I'm sad
It's hard
that
to
I'm only just
say.
hearing about
I
it.
don't know if he's still doing it. We went to the first one and it was very depressing, and we did not go
Oh,
after that. And I think he was trying to rebrand it
oh,
as like a San Jose like art show, or I don't know.
I get it. I get it. It's tough.
Yeah,
It's gotta be real. It's gotta be a tough one.
trying
All
to
right.
do
So,
anything.
oh, please, it just, yeah, I think that you have to find joy and reward in the doing, because if you're staking it on the success, the long term success, I don't know, the number of times that I thought, this time I'm certain this is the one I'm going to retire on. You can't.
Well,
I
like
think you
you
have to
gotta
be to the place with your, yeah,
to be an entrepreneur, you need that blind optimism that is unreasonable because you're gonna fuck up so many more times on the path to finding out what works. And any reasonable
right.
person would have given up and gotten like like a steady job like way
Right.
earlier in the process. But
That's
I still think
exactly
it's worth
it.
it if
Because,
you're built for it.
yeah, if you're doing something new that no one does, if there's a wide open field in front of you, there's a reason that's a wide open field, and that's because you have to make all the mistakes. And once you've made the mistakes, other people can follow the path behind you, but it's going to be tough, right? Which
Mhm.
you are showing. Speaking of paths that seem winding, I'm going to get this back to this narrative. My notes say 2007 you launched Silver Sprocket as a bicycle club that releases records. I mean,
Yes.
I guess that makes sense with the name, right? Silver Sprocket. I guess that's is that a bike reference?
Yeah. Well, so as a nerd, it was kind of a reference to like Jetsons of kind of futuristic being a nerd, but also the
Okay.
sprocket is a important part of a bike and how all the things connect to each other and it drives the momentum. Um, so I was completely burnt out on running a record label. I like I loved doing it, but I felt like half the bands had like one member that did things that I found just like really bad, and I couldn't in good conscience like try to build a pedestal for somebody who was doing something really shitty. And it
Yeah.
was just kind of exhausting with working with some of the personalities that I hadn't yet learned how to recognize, like, oh, this is going to be a terrible working relationship. Like, I should not invest myself into this. Um, but my group of friends was like really into like the empowerment of cycling, and we were in the process of opening up like a volunteer run bicycle shop up over there in Sacramento. So it was kind of goofy. I was making fun of things that nobody really knows what they are anymore. Like Gearhead Records was like a record label that was all about like car culture and hot rod culture. And I thought like
Yeah.
bicycles are really cool. Like, why would you want to have your identity be connected to the oil industry when if you ride a bike, you just have this freedom and you're not destroying the world in that way. And um, it was very high minded. And it was not originally about records, but like I was experimenting with fashion at the time, so like I designed some like tough guy biker jackets, but out of like vegan sailboat canvas that were designed to have secret pockets everywhere, so you could smuggle like a whole 6 pack of beer or 2 bottles of wine into like a concert or whatever. So well, we were making I designed a jacket for this like sci-fi like punk electronic whatever new band called the Phenomenauts. And so Silver
uh,
Sprocket was also kind of sci-fi because even though I didn't think I was putting out their records at the time, I was like still involved. Um, but then I like couldn't not put out records, and it got turned back into a record label despite my intentions. Um, before then having a transition into comics, which was much more natural than it might seem, because all like our artists out the door were like Ben Passmore, Michael's, like a bunch of incredible names who, even though they were much younger in their careers, people still knew who they were, and they had the experiences of already working with us to like do album covers and concert posters, and we paid them on time, and we would ask them for permission before using their art on a T-shirt, or like we just treated them as, with respect. And that allowed us to, like, when we were like, hey, like, do you want to do a book together, they were excited to, even though we didn't have a history of doing books, um, because they had those good experiences and they knew that we would be straight shooters, and we were really honest about what we knew and didn't know. And it's fucked because like those first like 4 or 5 books we put out, like most of them never broke even. Like they were massive learning experiences, but those artists still chose to continue working with us because they still had a really good time, and we did everything we could to make it right and make sure that they were taken care of.
you've talked about the sort of radical transparency with the creators you work with, and can you talk some more about what they like? And don't worry about getting too granular, because I'm really curious about this. I think that for the most part, like you were talking earlier about saying to musicians, just go do it yourself. Create
Yeah.
your own label. And some of them just want to get a royalty statement. Some of them don't want to have to think about the mechanics. They just want to create art. And maybe they even want to be a victim, right? I don't know. I don't want to get too far into their psychology, but um, what do you talk about for a moment? Like, what does that look like? Because the part of this that is kind of mind blowing to me is working from a kind of a corporate comics level.
Hmm.
You create a business model that works for the corporation, for the investors, for the goals of the company. Then you set up an agreement and you bring creators in with that agreement. And then sometimes you have to negotiate specific deals, but that means kind of taking away from here to give to here. So my question, I guess, my larger question is, how do you say to these creators, I still need to make a living, right? What
Yeah.
does that
So
radical transparency look like?
I guess I have like kind of a two-part answer to that. One is like the way that I'll typically like sign an artist is I'll, really love their work. We have a consensus among our crew that we think this is amazing and important, and we feel like other publishers wouldn't do it right or might not understand it. Um and we kind of tell them like, hey, like, first of all, you probably don't need us at all. Like, if we were to work with you or if you wanted to do this yourself, here's like my business plan of how I would approach that. And please feel free to just take this business plan and run with it. But they'll look at it and they'll say, oh, this is, I like this plan. This is really cool. You have references of what experiences you've had to make you think this is a good idea and why. Um, I don't want to do all this work. Can we just hire you to do it? And we're like, okay, cool, like perfect. Um, but a lot of publishers kind of go into publishing knowing like the odds are that if we put out 30 books, like maybe two or three of them will be big hits, and the rest of them are kind of a loss that we just don't know which ones will be successful. So we're throwing spaghetti at the wall. And with us, something like 95% of the books we publish pay a royalty within a year or a year and a half because we really focus on every single book and there is no filler. It's like we truly believe in all the things and we respect the artist of like, if you're going to spend 2 or 3 years of your life making this graphic novel, like what kind of a monster would we be to like just like if that is the plan, there's got to be honesty and transparency going into it of like, hey, we're taking a risk on you. If it doesn't sell this much by this part, we're going to stop paying attention to it. Like that major publishers don't have that conversation. And like, if you publish your book with even a lot of like really respected independent publishers, like so much of their back catalogs are not still in print where like, cool, the first print run sold out over a year and a half or 2 years, but it slowed down so much towards the end that the publisher doesn't want to reprint it. And then the artist is like, well, now what do I do? Like, I can't try to find a new publisher because it looks like damaged goods. Like, why didn't the original publisher want to
Right.
keep it in print? Also, there's no longer that built up demand for it out the gate because that existing new release demand has already been met. So, like, for us, it's really like we're very honest and upfront with when we talk about projects of like, here's what we imagine the first printing being, here's marketing that worked and didn't work for other similar projects. Um, Here's like the range of sales that we got for them. Here's what we think we want to try to do that's differently. We also have a greater commitment to keeping books in print, even if like it like right now we're facing a major cash flow issue and I'm really freaking out about we had 8 or 9 books sell out over less than a year and I'm determined to keep them in print because they're fucking fantastic and it's like we have to. But our distributors, the book trade distributors pay you 6 to 9 months after a sale happens and you have to pay for your book printing up front. And I don't want to get outside investors who are going to tell me what to do or take ownership of things or change how we operate. But we literally don't have all the money we need to keep these books in print. And it's like, I'm having to get really creative and reaching out to folks and just trying to navigate, like, how do we keep this working? But I think it's just being really direct and honest and transparent and just communicating all that stuff.
Isn't
Because
that I mean, I'm sorry to put on my consulting hat for a minute, but isn't that just the prime example of what crowdfunding could be for?
so I've had a chip on my shoulder about avoiding crowdfunding for a long time, and I don't think it's really fair. But well, first on a really simple level, I don't want my job to be running crowdfunding campaigns because it's so fucking much work, and it
It
really
is.
takes away from doing anything else. Um, I also feel though that we have been able to get a fair level of success. I mean, we've for the past few years we've grossed over $1 million a year, which is nothing compared to other indie publishers, but so much for us as like a tiny
Mm-hmm.
scrappy operation. And I really want to demonstrate through example that these models can work and do work, and that you don't have to sell your soul or get in bed with like horrible, unethical corporations owned by shareholders or weird investors to be able to make it work. Like, I really want to show that it can be done. But then on the other hand, like if I'm trying to compete with capitalism and how powerful that is, like that's wild. Like indie DIY ethical business like just isn't equipped to compete with capitalism in those ways. Um, so we're actually like looking like we just launched a subscription service to try to have like more predictable revenue and let people have an easy way to just sign up to get everything we publish once a month. And a lot of people like we got over like over $1,000 committed monthly in our first day of offering it, and we're going to keep promoting that. I mean, that's not enough to really move the needle yet, but it's very welcome. And we're talking about doing like
It
a
definitely
more
will help
formal.
some with the printing costs, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, everything
Yeah.
helps. Like we're on a very small scale. Like our but we are looking at having a more formal fundraiser in September, with a lot of transparency of like, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what we need. Here we have other options. Like I got a business line of credit because I would be an idiot not to. But using that line
Right.
of credit would also be pretty detrimental because like profit margins compared to interest rates are not a very good gamble. And it's like,
That's correct. Yeah.
so if I'm in a bind and I just absolutely have to pay to read to print something, like we're not going to shut down. We're still going to pay all the royalties on time, but like it would decimate the business to have to engage with the capitalist financial systems in that way. So I'm just really don't want to do that.
Well, I have little doubt that you're going to find your way through that puzzle. Talk. Will you define the words anti-professionalism for me?
Um, I think that professionalism is often confused with status quo, and uh, like I've that expression has kind of come up because I've been asked to do a lot of talks at like comic art schools, and they always have a class called professional practices, and that's what they want me as a publisher to come and speak to. And I look at their syllabuses, and I think they have so much important, good information and to teach these kids and expose them to, but I've found from my experience that a lot of it isn't actually like there's more to the picture of like not just how do you keep your publisher and your editor happy, but how do you self-sustain? How do you like what do you do to keep yourself okay as well? And then what are some of these professional practices that really aren't that important? And like what are ways that you can really thrive that are not part of the model of what the mainstream professional industry thinks success is? Like there's certain things that people are really trying for because they think that's what success is, that is actually totally meaningless and not really related to what success means to the artist. So I kind of like go into some of those details of like how to
Can you give
survive and how to
examples?
actually
I mean,
win on your own terms of like what's actually important to you, like
yeah.
what value are you getting from this?
Do you have any like? I mean, it sounds like you're giving practical examples in those talks. Can you
Yeah, I mean
give
I
any of
talk
that?
about like what how artists actually earn a living, like what it looks like behind the curtain, behind the all the smoke and mirrors of like what their actual like monthly expenses and revenue comes from, ways of structuring deals, like ways of thinking about in advance, but also like practical tips of like if you have this kind of an audience, self-publish. Like if you like nothing makes a publisher more thirsty to work for you than them thinking that you don't need them and you demonstrating that you don't need them. And
Yep.
and then even like
It's the same for
practical advice,
distributors as
like
well, right? It's the
absolute
same for
like diamond
distributors, for
finally.
printers, it's everybody. Yeah. If you go into
Yeah,
there saying, look, we already have this distribution channel, we already have this audience, it's going to put you in a much better position, right?
yeah, these are our existing
Yeah.
sales are already happening. I would rather spend my energy making books and promoting them, not dealing with shipping stuff out and chasing down invoices. Please take over this business that already exists from me, rather than like we're going to build this
Right.
from nothing. But even practical advice, like if you're self-publishing a book, you think that you have to go buy an ISBN code from like Bowker or whatever for like $500, and you don't. Like there's ways to get a free, depending on what kind of distribution you're doing. Like if you're doing a comic book and you don't care about the book trade because it's staple bound and you don't have a way to get into Ingram anyway, you could literally walk into any grocery store and grab like a package of like store brand cheese, and that UPC barcode, the first 6 digits are assigned to the company who gave it, and the next 6 digits are they assigned that themselves, and there's no global database anywhere of what those numbers mean. And there's a zero chance that any comic book or bookstore that you sell that book to has that cheese in their private POS system. So, like, I've helped a lot of people self publish their own books with like a stolen barcode that didn't hurt anyone at all and saved them from having to spend money for no reason on an ISBN to like a monopolistic, like like terrible abusive company that shouldn't have that exclusive from the government anyway.
That's incredible. All right. Thank you. I'm definitely gonna be telling that story. It makes total sense. You're absolutely right. These POS systems do have draw from a database. There are global databases of US UPCs, and
Kind
if you
of.
want to be professional, you want your own unique UPC. But
Well,
there's
but in
nothing saying
practice,
that the stores. Yeah, in practice,
so
that's not true.
but the book industry and the comic book industry don't get that data from a government database. They get it from the
No, no,
distributors and the companies that are run
right.
by consortiums of those distribution companies. And those distribution companies don't call like Safeway to ask if a barcode's in use on a piece of cheese on their shelf. So you
Yeah.
really don't have to
Diamond
ever
Comics is
worry.
never going to carry craft singles, so that's never going to be in the comic shop. That's
I've never had it be a problem. And I've been doing that since like the record label days.
that is wonderful. All right. Any of those tips that come up as we're talking, feel free to just jump in because that's what I'm here for. Um, all
I'm not forever,
right.
but I don't. Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about editorial. So, my understanding from listening to interviews with you and talking to you and talking to you now is that most of what you're printing is feels like it's already done. Is that right? Or are you in the process of helping people develop the books themselves?
It's really both. Earlier in
Okay.
Silver Sprocket's existence, it was primarily a book would already be finished and self-published by an artist or posted online, and then we would just pick it up for manufacturing, distribution, and marketing. But as we've been around longer, we're getting a lot more involved earlier in the process. So now it's actually the majority is stuff that kind of comes to us as a pitch or as like sketches or a partially completed work. And then like we have the best editor in the business, Ari Yarwood, who like she made everything that was amazing about Oni Press during her time over there. Like the whole Limerence series and everything. Like so now we're a lot more hands-on in like reading scripts and going through thumbnails and giving feedback. But we don't tell anyone what to do. Like it's not like, oh, this is more marketable, or like we need to get into the book fairs, so you can't like have a fuck word over here. It's more of like,
Right.
does this is this accomplishing what you want it to accomplish? Like here's what I got from this. Here's ideas about what might make it more clear. But it's always like the artist gets to call their own shots because we wouldn't be working with the artist if we didn't trust them and their experience.
That has always been kind of a philosophical touchstone for me, and dealing with editorial and artists when I am giving notes on books is it should be have you thought of it this way,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've made a choice here. Have you thought about this choice? That kind of, I always feel like it's a little more honest. It is a little more,
Well,
there is a
but
little
it
bit
makes
more
sense
integrity
that
there.
like a Scholastic knows what their market is, and they know that there's a bunch of stuff they're just not allowed to include. And we work with a lot of artists who also work with major publishers, and they ex- they express the difference of editorial being night and day, of like having a true collaborator to help them get their vision right versus having to deal with like a legal department standards and practices and like just all of these marketing concerns and even like really nitpicky like editorial story stuff of ways of phrasing things or to be more accessible in certain ways that kind of betray the goals of the book but are necessary for like a big corporation that approaches it as such a business in that way.
Sure. All right, so we've talked about that interaction with the artist. You talked about your role. I mean, it feels like what you're talking about is taking this work and amplifying it. I do want to call out. I mean, you've done some from a printing nerd standpoint. You've done some incredibly beautiful work.
Yeah.
It's I mean, people who understand what goes into that level of embossing, that level of foil, that level, the CMYK, the gilded edges. You can't get gilded edges in the continental U.S. people.
And
All
now,
of this stuff. Oh, you can? Oh, okay, good.
I mean, we did it.
The the Pantone colors I've seen you pulling in. I mean, just some of it's just incredibly gorgeous. And you're saying you said that 95% of the books that you have, you're paying out royalties. Does that mean that 95% of these books are profitable?
Yeah, but there's
Okay.
caveats. Like our advance is stuck. Like we have
Okay.
a minimum wage advance of like $500 if your book is under 64 pages and $1,000 if it's over. And
Okay.
our typical advance for like a proper graphic novel is usually anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000. There are a few exceptions of like if an artist really has a sales history and we know that there's like a demand where we're going to sell a certain amount out the gate. And even for that, it has to be like out the gate in pre-orders of direct mail order because that's cash that we get at the time of sale as opposed to a distribution sale. But so our advances are much smaller, but we do net 50 profit splits, which means we split profits 50-50 after costs are covered. And we have total transparency with the artist where they don't have to ask us for like complicate like to know what the like we use Google Sheets and they could just see a running ledger anytime they want of what were the expenses, what was the income, and that is to have transparency and let them be on the level with us. But it's also like imposter syndrome. Like, am I doing this the best way it could be done? Well, if everyone else has eyes on it, if there's something that we could be doing better, somebody will call it out, and that'll help level up our entire operation. So it's not leadership by committee, but it is transparent leadership so that anybody can always make a suggestion or ask a question to help it be better or, to keep us in check. But that
It's
being
a
said,
really
though,
interesting way. Yeah.
but like the like a
I'm used to
traditional,
thinking about the editorial process that way. I'm used to thinking about everybody saying, have a group of people all read it and sit down and talk about it. We had the last guest that aired will be airing just before this one was Mike Martz, and he talked about how the editorial process at some of the big places is, the teams sit down, they read the script, they read the books, and everybody comes with notes, and those notes get filtered to the creator. What you're talking about is almost the reverse, right? Where the creators are essentially giving you notes on the business practice of the company
yeah.
for their books. That's
Well, all of our
fascinating.
artists have experience self-publishing as well, so they are troves of
Yeah.
knowledge and individual experiences.
It's a
Um,
really interesting. It's
but
it's an
but
interesting model. I part of me is like completely terrified by it, but part of me is like, yeah, I'm intrigued. Yeah.
Well, like
Sorry.
growing
Anyway,
up
I
in the Bay
interrupted, I
Area,
think.
like there's a lot of co-op businesses. Like there's a local co-op anarchist bakery that is run similarly. There's the Buy Right grocery store is run by owners, but they have open book accounting so that any employee can always look at their ledgers and their QuickBooks and understand exactly what they're doing. So any employee can be like, "Oh, I wonder what we're paying on this. Oh, I found a way to do this better." And like if you're being honest and transparent with your employees, they also understand like the wage I'm getting is the best that we can do right now. Or if I do better over here, I see that we have more money and we might be able to do raises or improve the work we're doing. Like I
Right.
can't think of any ethical reason to not have that level of transparency with the people that you're working with. I think it only enables people to do better as long as you trust them and they have a stake in it and they care about it and they're not just troublemakers who want to argue about bullshit. So you do have to have a really good team to do it that way, but I think the rewards are
Sure.
plentiful.
There are
And
lots of
I also just
troublemakers,
want to
though.
add though on the topic of royalties, like a traditional like 8 or 10% royalty rate from a big publisher makes sense if your only distribution is through the book trade because of like the cost of printing books and all of the different things. But because
And
we also have
returns
like
and
our own
marketing.
storefront, our own mail order, and we go to conventions, depending on how the book is sold, we'll collect a different amount of money on each sale. So some artists end up getting the equivalent of like a 20% royalty rate because if the overwhelming majority of their sales are if they have a huge direct online audience, for example, or they do really well in store and at conventions, um, their royalty will end up being dramatically bigger than what it would have been on a major publisher who And also, the major publishers are double dipping. Like, Penguin Random House is a publisher, but they also have their own distribution company. So they're trying to claim, like, oh, well, this is how much we're making. And it's like, well, yeah, but then the other arm of your own company is also making all this other money over here. Like, it's deeply dishonest. Um,
Yeah, but is all right. And the example you just gave though, is the artist double dipping on yours? Because are
no,
you
no, I
giving
was saying
them?
that the
And I'm
major
saying,
publishers are
I know
double
what.
dipping.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm saying like the example that you just gave was giving a larger portion. They get the same proportion of the sale if it's sold through distribution or sold through a convention or in your shop, right?
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
So if we sell a
Are
book
you
through the book
also
trade,
giving them the incremental cost of being at that show or the incremental cost of running the shop to that
so the
sale?
way that we handle it on a nuts and bolts level is we've partitioned our store from our publishing house. So the store is
Yeah.
like an independent unit that buys from the publisher at the highest wholesale rate possible of 50%. So the same thing happens with convention sales. So no matter like anything that we sell at a convention for accounting purposes, 50% of the retail price goes into the ledger. But if you're working with major book trade distribution, you're getting way less than 50% after
Okay.
like distributor fees and shipping and like all
I
of the
get it.
other things.
I thought what you were saying was, you were now, let's say Silver Sprocket, the retailer is selling and getting 100% of the revenue. My understanding was that you were now saying that you were only going to get 75% of the revenue and you still had to pay the same costs. That was my
No,
understanding. But
no,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
it is a little
Yeah. Okay.
complicated for sure, but
It would have to be. It would have to be because you're doing something different, right?
it's
By
not that
nature, it's going to be
complicated.
complicated.
But yeah,
You've talked a lot about of selling in normal like physical brick and mortar meat space, if you will. Um, do you are you? I'm sure. I mean, you have a website where you're selling the books. I found that. Are you? Is that something that you focus on, explore? I mean, obviously, if you're not doing any sort of crowdfunding, that you're going to be essentially, are you just limiting your essential digital sales to what you can sell from your website? Are there other avenues that you're exploring, or is this really like it feels very tactile what you're doing? You're really focusing on that like tactile experience of moving a printed book from here to there to the hands of the consumer.
well,
Am I making any sense with that question?
uh,
Maybe not.
our distribution is, I mean, we do have our own direct website that we sell to end consumers. We also have some like between 300 and 400 direct wholesale accounts, which are like comic stores, bookstores, but also like non-comic, like sex toy stores and like thrift stores and coffee shops. We also have like the book trade through SCB, who does like Ingram and Baker and Taylor and everything. Then Diamond and Lunar, AK Press, and then like a bunch of niche places like Dispersed is the United States' biggest distributor of like designer vinyl toys, for example. So a lot of those places are really into carrying our comics, even though they don't really have a comic section beyond our books, because our books make sense for them as like beautiful, engaging objects in ways that other books are kind of a harder sell. So we're really like anything and everything that's worth our energy, we'll try it and see if it works. And if it does, we'll do our best. And if it doesn't, we'll move on and try something else. But we don't crowdfund, but usually when a mail order, like when a new book comes out, we'll offer like a pre-order bonus where if you pre-order it, you get like a special print or sticker sheet or something, which I think is very common in the industry to kind of give that
Yeah.
motivator kick in the butt. Um, and
Yeah.
all of
I
our
could see
artists
that.
have an experience self-publishing, so they already have existing audiences that want to be supporting them and understand the value of getting in there and putting in a pre-order or requesting it at a store or whatever.
Um, let's talk for a moment about format because I'm, as I mentioned earlier, become a bit of a printing nerd. You seem to be completely format agnostic. Walking into your booth at any show, the trim sizes are all over the place. The page counts are all over the place. The cover stock is all over the place. are you essentially, I mean, it feels to me like you're customizing around the work itself, but I'm
Yep.
curious to know, like, is there any sort of build, are you, now that you're building products, are you building products toward a total package? Like, do you know now when you start somebody's book that it's going to be this trim size, this page count, this size? Like, is that with
Yeah.
these
We're
enhancements, or are you just like that, this comes at the last minute?
No, it's not at the last minute at all. We have a kickoff call with each artist to talk about what the goals are for a project, both for the artist's career and life as well as for the book itself, like what constitutes success for them, to make sure that we're in alignment and that we can deliver on what's important to them, or be very transparent about like what we'll try our best at but don't really know that we're capable of. And that conversation includes, what is the book going to look like what's your dream version of this book, how big is it, what, and we have a very early, like, a file check of like, turn in a couple pages even if they're not real final pages, just so we know what your entire process is, so that we don't have last minute printing issues of, okay, this is supposed to be a Pantone but you just turned in flat RGBs, like, fuck. So um we make a template for the artist to make sure that they're drawing at the right size with the right bleed and the right formatting. And we also kind of know, like, they'll talk about what sizes they want, and we have recent experience printing at all sorts of sizes, and we even get quotes at that point, just to be like, okay, like, if your book is more than like 9 or 10 inches tall, it gets an order of magnitude more expensive because fewer pages can fit on a master sheet. Like, so is this a trade-off you want to be making between accessibility and having the art be gigantic? So the artist is
Right.
very involved in like figuring that out at a very early stage.
Cool. I love the sound of that. That's remarkable. All right. I wanted to. We have a few questions here that are really. Oh no, I've got this one that's completely. It's kind of a complete hard left turn, and I'm going to
Sure.
write it. Anthony, my researcher guy, he likes to occasionally give me a full question, and I love how he's worded this one. You were involved in a pretty viral piece of pop culture in Amanda Kirk's sloth drawing, which ended up being used without permission by a multi-million-dollar publicly traded companies.
Yes.
How did you navigate the copyright battle? What did you learn from that experience? Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, sure. Amanda Kirk is an artist we've been working with forever and ever. She's married to Mitch Clem, who was the first artist that we published comics with. Had a popular web comic called Nothing Nice to Say, and literally got us into doing comics with an anthology series called As You Were. That was all like comics by punk rockers, and that was like our first experience making comics. So much love and respect and appreciation for opening those doors. But Amanda's brilliant, and her art is so cute and fantastic. And I I don't have it nearby, but it's like a sloth that says "nap all day, sleep all night, party never," and it really got popular. And so Redbubble is a company whose business model is letting anyone upload any art they want and then being a print on demand service for that. But they're protected
Right.
by DC, by the Internet Copyright Act, where they're not literally printing the items, they're just a broker for a million different print on demand companies, and they just facilitate the transactions. So if your work gets ripped off by Redbubble and you tell them about it, they follow the law to the letter and give you a spreadsheet of all the people who have gotten payouts for plagiarizing your work through their system. And you're expected to like hire a lawyer to go after people in 100 different countries who may all be bots. And the countries might not even have a legal system that cares about copyright. Um,
Right.
and I'll add that Redbubble is such a terrible company that their entire legal team fired them as a client because they were refusing to stop printing shirts for literal Nazis, because they're like free speech absolutionists. And even if you're an artist who's successful on the Redbubble platform, you will immediately start having your art ripped off by a million bot accounts because they just don't care. Um, but what was interesting was that Redbubble's offices are located in San Francisco, about a mile away from my shop and home. So I kept on writing to them, and I had some people who literally worked at Redbubble give me some advice off the record of like, I fucking hate working here. These guys are terrible. Like their interpretation of libertarianism is just sickening. Um,
Yeah.
They've had like lawsuits from like the Hells Angels and Pokemon for like, refusing to. And it's another thing is
Man,
that
if you
there's,
piss off the Hells Angels and Pokemon, what are you
yeah,
doing with your life? You know?
well, they're making a
Yeah.
shit ton of
Anyway.
money. They're getting
Well,
rich,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
they're pretending that they don't have a way to prevent people from uploading plagiarized art, even though if you upload like, Mickey Mouse to like Cafe Press or any of the other services, it says, "Oh, we've detected a copyright image," because there's free open source
Yeah.
software that you can make a library of things that have already been flagged as not being allowed, and you can just have it check that as they're uploaded, and maybe have a person have a dispute policy of someone going, "Oh no, this is transformative" or whatever, but they just choose not to do that. So I after they ignored my letters and pleas for a while, I just walked over to their office with a care package, like some gifts of our merchandise, and just a letter of like, "Hey, like, is there anything we could do to like this is." I don't think it's really like hurting us, but it really is stressing out the artist, and it makes the artist not want to post any art online because it's demoralizing to see when you're struggling to pay your bills and you see a million bootlegs selling on the internet. It's like I shouldn't share my art with anyone because I'm going to get fucked over by it. And my art is going to get used by people that I don't know and don't like. And I'm not going to see anything for it. It just was really bad for morale. So
Yeah.
I visited and I rang the buzzer. They let me in. I don't think they knew. Like, I was very honest. Like, I didn't try to pretend anything, but they seemed to think I was like the mail. So they let me into their mail room, and I was kind of joking, like life hack: if Redbubble rips you off, they'll let you right into their mailroom to take back all of your plagiarized goods. Um, but I was like, "Hey, can I talk to anyone about this? Here's like a letter and some art and some stickers and shirts. Like, I really want to be nice, but like, I just really want to talk to somebody because your form responses aren't really getting anywhere, and it's really frustrating." And I could see them like through the window of the office, like talking to each other and pointing at me. And I was like, "Yeah, like, can I talk to your anybody? Like, you're just literally anyone." And they're like, "Okay, yeah, we'll get our lawyers in touch." And eventually, they like sent me home and said that their lawyers would contact me, and they never did. They
Of course.
Vice wrote an article that quoted the owner of their company saying that I had refused to talk to their lawyers, which was completely not true. I was begging them to talk to me, and they were just too cowardly to. But the very interesting thing that happened was after that blew up everywhere, they stopped plagiarizing our designs. And they cannot
Because
publicly
they could
say,
control it.
because they
Yeah.
could control it, but if they acknowledge that they can control it, then they're on the hook for controlling it for everybody. So
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to just keep it quiet and just because they know that it would decimate their business that relies on piracy. So fuck Redbubble. They don't care about artists. They just want to profit off of your work. There are plenty of print on demand companies that do very good work that are actually nice to artists. So um, I kind of won, but I only
Amen.
won for myself. And I really wish that victory could have been shared by more people.
Yeah. That sounds like, well, maybe you also gave them a path towards victory. You know,
Yeah, go
you
visit
built
their headquarters and make some memes
just
about it.
camp out.
I don't know. Maybe.
uh, um, you mentioned. We've had on this podcast. We've had a couple of different people who were involved in the new Comet standard for comic shops.
Yeah. Love
And
those nerds.
it is what's that? Oh, me too.
I said I
Me
love
too.
those
They're
nerds.
It's such a beautiful little group of people. They You mentioned that you felt like it was a step in the right direction, but there's even more data that you want. What sort of data are you looking for, and how would you envision using it?
So there's a lot to go into here, but as a record label being around like from the 90s, do you remember mp3.com?
Yeah, of course. Mm-hmm.
So as a record label, we would take like two or three songs from every record we put out and put them on mp3.com for free as like a promotional thing. And behind the scenes though, mp3.com would give us heat map, like spreadsheets of downloads by zip codes, which we would then share with like the Tower Records chain, for example, and they would make a map overlaying where the downloads were happening to where their record stores were. And they found that those heat maps was the very best predictor of album sales. It was better than SoundScan or Tor routing or press coverage or anything else. It was like the most accurate predictor of where fans were who wanted to buy those records. Um, and I feel like as a comic industry, it'd be really cool if there was like a nonprofit or just some trade organization of publishers, for example, that made like a tracking pixel that whenever we embed preview pages of our comics online, there's a tracking pixel on there, and we get detailed heat maps of where people are reading our comics that can then be used as a marketing tool to help stores know about where fans literally exist in the world, and take it a step further and actually get like anonymous demographic data of like, okay, if someone's reading this, what are they also reading? Much like Last.fm in the 90s, which was like it kept track of all of the music you listened to on your computer, and it gave you amazing statistics of what you were listening to, but also what people were listening to in different regions, what the trends were, and like fans of this are likely to also be into this. Like it was just amazing demographic data, and I feel like these are just two of many examples of things that the music industry figured out like literally 30 to 50 years ago that already work really well, that are so figured out off the shelf, that is such low hanging fruit for the comic industry to directly emulate with minimal changes. Um, I mean, I think obviously we need like point of sale sales data, not just distribution level sales reports. Um, but I think like there's just so much data for the taking that just needs to be organized a little bit, that can, and like even like marketing programs like with record stores, they had a standard, an industry standard thing was first you believed in your product, you knew you wanted it to keep selling past the first week of release, so
Mm-hmm.
you'd pay for like a listening station, and the typical trade was you send 10 free copies of the CD to a store, and then they commit to keeping it in stock for at least that entire month with a big display and a listening station. And the way that works for you as the publisher or the record label is you're out of pocket the production cost of 10 CDs, which is like $10. But if your record is good, the store is committed to keeping it in stock for at least a month with a big display. So anything they sell over those 10 copies is sales that you might not have gotten without that marketing push. And having proper data and having systems like that in place are something that I think would really just be like really no brainers of like get stores to sign up to take part in programs, have like committees of stores that like vote on like, okay, what are the 5 books that we're going to feature this month across our network of stores, and then like have data that we provide back to the publishers so they know like what kind of return they got on their investment. um, but this depends on like distributors have to keep books in stock, publishers have to believe in the books they're printing to print enough, not just initial demand, and you need like robust data collection and sharing. Um, and I don't think it's that much of a reach.
Well, I don't think, and I think that there are people that are working on the data, robust data collection and sharing. That's getting
Absolutely.
close. I know from talking to a few of them, and then the project that we're working on that I'm happy to share with you offline. Someday we'll be able to talk about it in public. But
Well,
so that
definitely.
is happening. I think that the larger question though is really what I think Rach, you got to was this question of how do you keep something in stock, like 10 copies. If I send you 10 copies of something and you only are obligated to promote it and keep it in stock, you may get one restock inside of a month, right? I mean,
Well, if you really believe
I
in the
mean, there's going
book,
to be a
like,
challenge in that. It's a logistical challenge, but that you can tinker with that. It can be over 6 months. I'm quibbling. That's dumb. That's dumb for me to do, but yeah, you're right.
well, but like, okay, if
uh,
you're ordering from Diamond and Lunar, you only expect to get an order once a week, and that order is based on numbers you put in well before that time period. But
right.
if you also order from Ingram, you can place an order and you'll get that order within 2 days, no matter where you are in the country.
No,
So,
that's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
um,
Yeah, I'm so used
it,
to thinking in comic scale. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, like,
yeah.
and now that everyone, I mean, I think I'm bummed that people are stressed out about the extra work of having to order from multiple distributors, but like the comic industry has not been very well served. Like if your product is hot and sells out and that means you have to wait at least a week to get more, like that really sucks. Like there's no other
Yes.
industry that would put up with that.
Well, and there's a number of things that go into that, right? If your product is hot and it sells out and it's a $4 item, that's really tough, especially if you're only ordering 5 or 6 at a time. In any other industry, a $4 item would be a gross item. You'd be ordering it in 12s or 24s, right? So you would
Yeah,
have it
it's
in
not
stock,
soda.
and yeah, exactly. But if you're talking about a hardcover that is $25 or $30, well, then it makes sense to like put it in a box and get it to you inside of a week. But I can see, there's some hurdles that make comics the way that comics are made makes them very specific, I think.
I'm very
Um,
happy to argue all of these points, but we
I'm sure
probably
you
want
are.
to get into some other territory as well. But I really I've thought a lot about this and talked to a lot of people about this, and I think it's
Sure.
really an issue of what comic book retailers are used to doing and what the standard practices are, and kind of
Oh, that
blundered
is
about like not really wanting to look outside their lanes of like how does a corner
that's for
store
certain.
handle this? Like
That is
how
very
does
certain.
any
Yeah.
other type of store handle this? And they do, and it's not that hard.
Well, and it's generational, right? I think you're seeing younger stores come in and they don't care. They just don't care that this is how distribution works. This is how it always has worked for them. You're seeing people that are a little more nimble, that are a little more exploratory. This like, all right, cool, I'll figure it out.
Well,
And we've also really not yet developed the systems in place, like the bookstore market and the record store markets. As you said, like it's a systems issue. There is we don't yet have the same level of systems that indie bookstores have.
we
We
do if you
don't.
want them, because Ingram will sell to any comic book store that wants an account, and you can get every single one of our books, including the mini floppies from Ingram.
All right. Okay.
So it's not
Yeah,
hard.
sure. Yeah, no, you're not wrong about that.
And
Um,
if you only order from Diamond, you're effectively the Diamond Company store. Like there's no other type of established retail outlet that only has one single supplier. Like, because even
yeah.
though all the comic stores are independent and get to make their own decisions and curate their own experiences, if you only have one distributor, you're quite limited. And what makes your store special or interesting or unique? And yes, that Diamond catalog is a huge fucking phone book of millions of books every month, but it's also one. It's not that many different kinds of books. It's books that are trying to be successful on a very specific model and like aesthetic and value proposition that I do think is pretty limiting. And I think comics are so much more interesting and more versatile than what's in there.
I agree. I mean I applaud this new fracturing of distribution and I think it's always good when you can give people more choice. That this challenge is curation. The challenge is systems, right? And
Yeah,
if
but
you
there were
have to
comic book
learn and accept
stores.
new curation systems.
But for the past like 40 years, there have been comic book stores that would place an order every month with Last Gasp. And they got a wider curation of comics than a store that would only order from Diamond.
True.
So it's also about
Very
attitude
true.
and values. And do you just love superheroes? And if you do, that's great. Live your best life with that being your curation. But there's so much more to comics than that.
Well, that has always been the way. The shops that want to, I mean, in the late '90s, I worked part time as a sales rep for Fantagraphics, and so I would work directly with stores to restock them. They would get a better deal. They would come directly from Seattle, and those stores, yes, they did have one more invoice to pay. They did have one more package to receive, but that meant that they got access and they got a better deal. So,
Yeah,
it's always been that way if they wanted it. You're right about that. You talk
I'm right
about,
about
I
all
mean,
of it. Go ahead.
you know what? I'm not going to argue with that. You're absolutely right. There's been no wrong stated here.
I
Um,
wish I could.
you, speaking of curation, your shop sounds like from just from a shopping point of view, incredible. It feels like I'm going to walk in, I'm going to find something I've never seen before.
Mhm.
I'm going to probably find a book that just feels like it was just created for me, right? I think that's an incredible experience. From a data standpoint, though, are you tracking all of those? They don't all have UPCs, right? They
Yeah, of
can't all
course.
have craft singles UPCs. Oh, they
Uh,
do. Okay.
so we're they don't all, no, they don't all have UPCs, but
Okay.
we use Shopify. So if it has a
Okay.
UPC, great, and if it doesn't, we just type in the name of it. We have to track our inventory. We're selling it in the shop and online. So if someone buys something online, we need to know to take it off the shop floor or not let someone buy it if the orders came in at the same time. Um,
I got you.
and yeah, it's really not that complicated. We can import whatever data we want to import, and we can manually enter whatever data we want to manually enter. Thank fucking God we don't carry like, periodicals, so we don't have to deal with like variant covers and like that whole mess of data that I know a traditional comic shop does. Um, and one other thing about our shop is there's nothing like if a book comes in shrink wrap or a poly bag, we open it up because I mean, in the 70s, you would go to a record store and see a record cover and be like, oh, this looks amazing. I want to go see what this looks, go hear it. I have to buy it to take it home. But now, like, nobody buys a record without first having listened to it on Spotify or YouTube to, like, already know that they want it. So if somebody picks up a book and gets emotionally invested in it, even if they read that whole book, it has value to them. And putting it back on the shelf is like giving up something. So we've found like one of the things we tell people trying to sell our books is like don't put them in plastic, like let people read them. Like they don't already know what our books are. Like we market them the best we can. We have a giant social media and email list and everything, but like most people won't come in knowing what it is, but they'll be very interested because the books look sick as hell. So if
Yeah.
you put it in shrink wrap, you're kneecapping your potential sales.
Oh yeah, and especially like I said, the care that you guys are putting into to the printing and the paper and the laminates, like all of that. Once you feel it, once you hold it, does something to you. There's a reason you never want to put it down. It's yours now.
Yeah, we're
Yeah,
brain
I totally feel
virus.
that. Yes, exactly, exactly. Well, shout out to Brian Garside, who's been on the show, who's part of that comic group. Actually, has a POS system that, if you wanted to carry single issues, would work with your Shopify. But there you go. Um,
Totally.
Back in 2023, your shop was hit pretty bad by a storm, which flooded your basement. Right. Everybody who owns a brick and mortar store has gone through something similar because you're dealing with meat space books, where you're dealing with atoms, not electrons. Um, what advice do you have for stores that go through something similar? Like, what have you learned from that are like weather or other natural disasters? Were there any learnings that you dealt with there?
I mean, on a nuts and bolts level, we already knew that nothing should have been on the floor and everything should be like on a pallet or a shelf. But the water got really high. Like our bottom shelves and pallets still got flooded. Um,
Yeah.
what I really learned was the power of community because it was New Year's Eve when that storm was happening. So I was dressed up to go to a party, and instead I was pumping and shoveling water out of my basement. Um, and I put out a call for help, and a bunch of people showed up, and I was literally moved to tears because the next morning, at like 8 or 9 in the morning, like 30 people showed up to help us just move like probably 50 tons worth of books out of the basement onto the shop floor so that they wouldn't get further damaged by like mold and mildew. And it's New Year's Day. Who's even looking at the internet? Who like you should be having brunch with your friends or sleeping in. And
Yeah.
a ton of people, like so many people, were just like, "We got to save Silver Sprocket," and I'm getting teary eyed. Like we would have been completely decimated without that help. Like, and I think I don't know if people would do that for just any business. Like, you'd have to hire movers. Like, you'd be fucked. But we host community events. We're very personable. We're engaged with our community, and community looks out for community, and that was really beautiful. I mean, it sucked. Like the back half of our store was a giant pyramid of boxes for 6 months and not shoppable, and trying to do mail order took so long to find anything. Like It really fucked. Like we're
Sure.
still feeling the impact of that. But but it would have been a like death kill attack or whatever the expression is, without that community support.
Well, I mean, it sounds to me like you invested in community, and in community paid your dividends. If those would not investing in community, hopefully they have enough money in the bank to pay someone to do it. You have not. You've invested in the
How are you
people.
gonna
I think
on New
it's
Year's
beautiful.
Day at 8 a.m.? How are you gonna get a team? And
You're
we
not.
we had
You
more people. Like we made a fire line all the way from the basement to the back of the store, just handing boxes over, and it was fucking incredible. I like it was all the bodies that we could fit in there, and we fucking did it.
you had an "It's a Wonderful Life" moment. Look at that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was really beautiful.
Oh, that's wonderful, man. All right. What would you say is the biggest risk facing comics? And we're going to use the capital C comics and define that any way you want. What do you think is the biggest risk that is facing the industry of comics, the art form of comics today?
I mean, I think like comics have been around forever if you want to like really get big-headed about it of like hieroglyphics or I mean people draw and write and people are going to continue doing that. So I do think like Jurassic Park style life finds a way, but I think that the comic industry as it's presently structured has a lot of weak points or areas where it's not really living up to its potential. So I think the inability to evolve, the inability to think bigger picture about what comics could be, could really screw over certain people or certain models. But I think comics are the healthiest and most vibrant and thriving that they've ever been because the ability for someone to make their own comic and self distribute is greater than it's ever been at any point in human history. And I think that the the entire ecosystem of it that's able to tap into that and appreciate it and engage with it is going to continue to thrive.
I usually ask that question at the end of the interview, and then I ask, because usually the answer is something pretty doom and gloom. Because we've had people who know, their jobs pretty well, and they've gamed out what's the worst case scenario.
Mhm.
And so I usually ask that question, and the next question is, what gives you hope? But I think you just gave it. So
I have
I
more
think
hope than
we're
doom. I really I think if you're paying attention and if you're doing something interesting, like you're doing great.
beautiful, beautiful. Um, is there anything else for the literally dozens of people who are still watching this long form interview of ours? Is there anything else you'd like to impart and discuss before we head off to our prospective preparations?
Um, I mean, I, I don't know. I mean, I should plug my comics. Like, I mean, I've been talking a lot about
Please.
like I've been saying a lot about like industry stuff and like business stuff, but like the comics we publish are truly a joy to read and will like leave you transformed. Like, we don't publish frivolous garbage. Like everything we put out is really meant to be enjoyed and cherished and gifted and make a difference in your life. So please read our books. They're very good. They're meant to be enjoyed and have value. And we don't do variant covers. We make books for readers, not for collectors. But people do collect them for some reason too. So whatever. But yeah, just give us a shot. And there's the world of indie comics is just so fantastic and vibrant right now that like if if you're blind if your definition of indie is like Dark Horse and Image, like um you're not an idiot. We all have to have an entry point. Mine was X-Men and Superman, but there's just so much more really amazing comics out there that like if you work in comics, like get the most enjoyment out of comics that you possibly can because there really is so much joy to be gotten from them.
Well, I can say just from personal experience, if you have a home that you like filling full of beautiful things, you can't go wrong buying Silver Sprocket books. They are
Hey,
beautiful.
what's up?
Ah, where do people find you? Where do people hear from you? What would you like them
Just
to know?
type Silver Sprocket on anything. We've got our store that ships worldwide and free shipping, and you can get our stuff in any bookstore. We're on social media, I guess. Yeah, or just ask a punk.
Ask a punk. I like it. Hi again. Thanks so much for watching Comic Industry Insiders. It, as always, is our pleasure to talk to the movers and shakers of comics and to bring you those conversations. We'd love it if you'd support us with a like and subscribe, and telling your friends is always good, but really what we'd want to do is hear from you. Any questions, any suggestions you have about our show, any suggested guests, frankly, anything at all, we'd love to hear from you. Our producer is nearly always Stephanie Gerk, and our researcher is Anthony Militano, who makes me look much smarter than I am. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Namaste, y'all.